Under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, and according to the result of his work, the living entity, the soul, is made to enter into the womb of a woman through the particle of male semen to assume a particular type of body. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3:31-1. Because of your karma, you'll always have a dress, a body. The living soul is not destroyed after the destruction of this body. Therefore he remains in his underwear, the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. So according to the composition of his mind, he develops another body. This is the process of transmigration of the soul. You, the spirit soul, are always the same, although you are changing bodies just like a person changes his clothes. Our problem is that we are perpetually changing bodies, but our desire is to have a permanent life. That is why we offer spiritual education. You can have a permanent life, a permanent body with a permanent identity and knowledge, if you become free from the body-changing problem. That is called mukti. The esoteric teaching is intended to stop this business of changing bodies and bring us to our eternal, perfect body. We have a distinction between our body and our self, the soul. But Kṛṣṇa has no such distinction. Kṛṣṇa's body is completely spiritual. Just because Kṛṣṇa comes to this planet and appears before us in a form similar to a human being's, if we think that he is also like us, then we are fools. Kṛṣṇa does not change his body. Otherwise, Kṛṣṇa could not say that millions and millions of years ago I spoke this philosophy to the sun god. Because we change our body, therefore we forget who we were in our past lives. But Kṛṣṇa doesn't forget. Therefore, the purpose of the esoteric teaching is to educate everyone in this science of Kṛṣṇa, Bhagavad-gītā as it is. The perfection of spiritual consciousness is always to think of Kṛṣṇa. As Kṛṣṇa says, Man mana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mang namaskuru, Bhagavad-gītā 1865. These four principles: always think of Kṛṣṇa, become Kṛṣṇa's devotee, worship Kṛṣṇa, and offer your respect and obeisances to Kṛṣṇa. This is Kṛṣṇa consciousness, God consciousness, or self-realization. The fundamental question of our interest in self-realization is to know the soul, the form and definition of the soul, and how to know the difference between the soul and matter is described in Bhagavad-gītā. Na jayate na mriyate. The soul is never born and never dies. The soul is eternal. Nitya shashvato yang na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Bhagavad-gītā 2:20. Even after the destruction of this body, the soul is not destroyed. This spiritual education is required to attain the goal of human life, self-realization. The qualities of the soul are known to one who has become sober, dhira. If you want to realize the soul, the shortest way is through the tongue, by chanting the holy name of the Lord. This is the soul within this body, and the symptom of the soul is consciousness. We are all spirit souls, but we have no eyes to see this truth directly. Just like the eye cannot see itself, you cannot see the soul. So what is the value of your eyes? You cannot see so many things, like electricity, yet you believe they exist because of their symptoms. Because you cannot see the soul, it does not mean there is no soul. We have to accept some authority, so we accept Kṛṣṇa's authority. We cannot see the soul in our present consciousness because our eyes are imperfect. So the proof that there is a soul is that as soon as the soul is gone, a living body becomes a dead body. That's the proof. If you want to see the soul directly, you must become qualified. Tadvidi paripartena pariprashnena sevaya. Bhagavad-gītā 4:34. You must approach a self-realized person who knows the secrets of spiritual life and inquire by surrender, not by challenge. You cannot know about the soul and God by a challenging spirit. You have to become submissive and accept a spiritual master who knows. Then, by following his instructions, you will also come to know. That is the process of the esoteric teaching. So I began this process about 35 or 40 years ago. In fact, it was almost 40 years ago in 1967. I first saw my spiritual master chanting the holy name in New York City. And I didn't know what I was seeing. I had no idea what it meant. I had no idea of its power, of its influence. So now, almost 40 years later, I can say that this process really works, and I have attained the result given in Bhagavad-gītā and the other Vedic scriptures. So, is that too much for you? 40 years! My God, how do you do anything over a span of 40 years? Well, let me say this. The power of the holy name is such that if you hear it from a self-realized soul, it will act. It may take time, but it will act, and your life will be arranged in such a way that it can act. So you may not take anything from this particular recording, or maybe you will, but something will happen in your life, and it will be arranged in such a way that you'll come in contact further with devotees, with other students of the esoteric teaching. And things will happen, and you'll be forced into certain decisions and actions that will bring you further along this path. Once you hear the holy name, the power of the holy name is such that it almost drags you back to spiritual consciousness. And it might take you 30 years, or it might take you 30 lifetimes. It's up to you. You can become Kṛṣṇa conscious in a second if you really want to, if you know how. The process is Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. So by hearing about God, by hearing about Kṛṣṇa from a self-realized soul, then we begin chanting. And then by chanting, we remember him. That's the process. It's very simple. I've given you mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And if you've forgotten how to chant, please go to the website and review the video on how to chant with the beads and so on. It's very simple, easy process. Anyone can do it. Even a child can do it. Anyone who has a desire to attain their original spiritual nature and stop this business of birth and death in the material world, they can take shelter of this process, chant this mantra, and become self-realized. It's very easy, and it begins with the tongue. So you just take this mantra, chant this mantra every day for 1 or 2 hours, and take your food, offer it to Kṛṣṇa before eating, and there, you've controlled the tongue. Only speak of Kṛṣṇa and topics related to Kṛṣṇa, and don't accept any nonsense food cooked by people who are not spiritually conscious, and you will remain Kṛṣṇa conscious. It's very easy, very simple. Now, my advice to you is that you start to tell your friends about this esoteric teaching, start to engage them in the same process, form a small group, and gradually develop a community in your area. That way, you will be taking responsibility for your spiritual life, and you will be creating yourself a little community so that you can spend the rest of your life in this process and attain the results. You cannot get the same quality of results from a cheap, quick process. Real deep change takes time. It's taken us time to get ourselves into this situation, and it's going to take time to get ourselves out. So become resigned to that fact now, because that's the real situation. And use the time. You're here anyway. So utilize the time to perform service to Vasudeva, to Kṛṣṇa, and then, gradually, by degrees, you will attain your perfect body. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Your Perfect Body. This is David Hughes, your host, reminding you to visit us on the web at esotericteaching.org, where you can purchase the complete Esoteric Teaching Introductory Seminar DVD and many CDs of transcendental music and mantras.